My husband slapped me because his mom told him to. I took my baby and left home. Hi, I'm Mary. I'm 30 years old and a few months ago I became a mother for the first time. It's been an exciting but challenging time. It's the kind of experience that makes you grow in ways you never expected. Those first days at home with my baby boy were filled with so much joy, but they were also exhausting beyond anything I could have imagined. I knew having a baby would change my life, but I didn't fully realize how tough it would be to physically recover from childbirth, while also managing everything else like the household and caring for my son. The house had become a little chaotic. The laundry was piling up and the dishes were often left in the sink longer than I wanted. I barely had a moment for myself, constantly running around trying to meet my baby's needs. One afternoon, as I was trying to calm my crying son, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was surprised to see Janet, my mother-in-law, standing at the door. She gave me a tight-lipped smile and stepped inside. Her eyes moved around the living room, taking in the toys scattered across the floor and the stack of unwashed dishes visible in the kitchen. I could feel her judgment before she even said a word. Janet wasn't someone who hid her opinions well, and the look she gave me told me everything I needed to know. I thought I'd come by to check on you, she said, her tone flat as she stepped over a baby toy on the floor Jerry mentioned. You might need some help. I forced a smile. Thanks, Janet. Things have been a little crazy, but we're managing. My voice was calm, but inside I was feeling overwhelmed. I could see she wasn't convinced. She walked into the kitchen and the sound of the dishes clinking together as she inspected them made me wince. Looks like you could use more than just a little help. She said, her tone was sharp. Is this how you plan to raise my grandson? Her words hit me hard, and frustration and sadness welled up inside. I was trying my hardest, but it felt like nothing I did was ever good enough. I replied, holding my son a little closer, trying to shield myself from her harsh gaze. Janet sighed, clearly unimpressed. She said, being a mother is about prioritizing. She shook her head. Right now, it looks like you're not prioritizing anything properly. Before I could respond, Jerry walked into the room. He took one look at us and instantly sensed the tension. Amazing job, he said, his voice gentle as he tried to diffuse the situation. It's been tough, especially with the baby not sleeping well. Instead of calming down, Janet turned to Jerry. Her expression hardened. You need to help her understand what's important, she said. It's not just about keeping the house clean. It's about being responsible. She's not living up to the family standards. I could see that Jerry was torn, caught between his mother and me. He looked at me, then he looked back at Janet, unsure of what to say. Let's not do this right now, he said. Mary is still recovering. He tried to reason with her, but Janet cut him off. That's exactly the time when discipline needs to be taught, she snapped. If she learns to manage things now, she'll be better off in the future. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My heart pounded, and tears welled up in my eyes. Then, as if the situation couldn't get any worse, Jerry turned to me. He hesitated, and then he said, maybe you're right, Mom. Maybe Mary does need to learn the hard way. His words were like a punch to the gut. I stared at him, stunned. How could he side with her when he knew how hard I was trying? Janet gave a firm nod, as if she had won some battle, and pushed Jerry towards me. She wanted to show me that this kind of behavior can't be tolerated. She said, her voice cold, what happened next is something I'll never forget. Jerry hesitated for a moment, then, without warning, he struck. He slapped me across the cheek. The slap echoed through the room and for a second everything seemed to stop. I held my son close, his cries mixing with the sound of my racing heartbeat. Jerry, what are you doing? I managed to ask, my voice breaking as tears streamed down my face. The pain from the slap was nothing compared to the pain of betrayal. This is for your own good, Mary, he said, his voice flat as if he truly believed that he wouldn't even look me in the eyes. Janet stood there, her expression unchanging. She didn't move or say anything. She just watched, and it made everything feel 100 times worse. I felt like my world was shattering. Instead of support, I was met with judgment and violence from the people who were supposed to love me. Janet was preparing to leave, and she whispered something to Jerry at the door. I couldn't hear her words, but I could see the look on her face and the way Jerry's shoulders slumped. That night, I rocked my son to sleep, trying to calm him as much as I was trying to calm myself. But the fear and dread wouldn't leave me. What was supposed to be a loving family now felt like something else entirely. I realized then that I needed to leave, not just for my safety but for my son's too. The next morning, while Jerry was at work and Janet was thankfully gone, I made a call to Maria, a close Maria, who'd always been there for me, answered on the first ring. "It's me, Mary. I need the help you offered. No more talk. I'll come by today with my truck. We can move your things to my place until you figure out what to do next." I'd move everything out before Jerry came home all day. As I packed my things, I felt my heart racing. I knew what I was doing was dangerous, but it was the right thing to do. I had to protect my son. This wasn't just about me anymore. Every baby outfit and toy placed in a box felt heavy with memories of what I had hoped my life would be, but the sharp memory of Jerry's slap and Janet's cold judgmental eyes reminded me that staying wasn't an option. By late afternoon, most by the time I'd finished packing, I'd hidden the boxes in the garage, just as the sun was setting. Maria arrived, and she was like a beacon of hope. "Are you ready?" she asked, stepping inside. I nodded, holding my baby boy closer. I was ready as I'd ever be. We loaded everything into her truck, working quickly and efficiently, like we'd done this 100 times before. The last room I packed was. The nursery was my little sanctuary, the only place I'd felt even a small amount of peace. I took one last look around before closing the door behind me as we drove away. I watched the house face fade into the distance, feeling a mix of emotions. My son was sleeping peacefully in his car seat, unaware of the changes happening around him. This was the start of a new life for us, a life where fear and manipulation wouldn't have a place. Maria's place gave me a great sense of relief. Her home was warm and safe, which was a stark contrast to what mine had become. Being there made me even more determined to make sure Jerry and Janet could never hurt us again. Simply leaving wasn't enough, I needed to protect myself and my son from any further harm. Over the next few weeks, I began to gather evidence. I reached out to friends and family, pretending I just wanted to catch up. I slowly started to piece together stories and moments when Janet had crossed the line. I also found out that Jerry had acted in ways that were out of character when he was under her influence. The most valuable piece of evidence came when I managed to record Janet coaching Jerry on how to control me. Her words and intentions were clear: this wasn't about love or concern, it was about power. Once I had enough evidence, I knew it was time to confront them. I chose a family gathering hosted by Jerry's sister. It was a neutral place with plenty of family members around. Some of them had already hinted that they were uncomfortable with the way things were. Janet was in charge of everything, so I hoped they'd be willing to listen on the day of the gathering. I was nervous. My hands shook as I walked into the room, with Maria by my side. The air was thick with tension, and people greeted me with murmurs, their eyes filled with curiosity and concern. After a few minutes of small talk, I took a deep breath and stood up. I had something important to say. I began, in a steady voice, despite my heart racing. I told them about Jerry and Janet and how their actions have affected me and my son. I told them how their actions had affected me and my son. Jerry's eyes widened in shock. "Mary, let's not do this here," he said, but I didn't stop. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the Bluetooth speaker. The room fell silent as the recordings began to play. Janet's cold, controlling voice, Jerry's hesitant agreement, it was all there, laid bare for everyone to hear. The reactions were immediate, shocked gasps and looks of disgust. Jerry's aunt, who had always been kind to me, turned to Janet, her voice trembling, asked if it was true. "Janet, were you really forcing Jerry to do this?" Janet's face flushed with anger. "These are taken out of context," she snapped, but it was too late. The damage was done. Family members began to speak up, sharing their own stories of Janet's manipulations. Slowly, a picture emerged of a woman who had controlled her family for years, hiding behind the guise of a caring mother. Jerry sat there in silence, pale and ashen as he listened to the truth about his mother. After the confrontation, the room fell silent. The family, who had long been under Janet's influence, had to come to terms with what had happened. I knew that leaving Jerry was the right decision, but it was still difficult. As the family began to leave, I gathered my son and stepped outside. Jerry watched us, his face filled with regret. Janet, on the other hand, faced a harsh reality. The family she'd controlled for so long was finally breaking free from her grip in the weeks that followed. Jerry tried to reach out with messages full of apologies and promises of change, but he couldn't forget the memory of that slap and the influence his mother had over him. The trust between us was shattered, so I moved into a small apartment far away, a place where I could start over. My days were simple, caring for my son was finding moments of joy in the little things. I started going to therapy and I joined a support group for single mothers. Gradually, I began to heal. The months passed and with each passing day I grew stronger. My son's laughter became my anchor, pulling me through even the toughest moments. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I was stronger and more resilient. One night after putting my son to bed, I sat down in my cozy living room and thought I was ready to share my story. I started a blog, a space where I could write about my experiences. It wasn't just for me, it was for others who might be going through something similar. Each post I wrote was a step away from the victim I used to be. It was a step towards becoming someone who could help others. I had found my voice and I was using it. To speak out against the kind of control I had once lived under. My story was one of resilience, of finding strength in the face of hardship. Now, as I end this chapter, I want to ask, do you believe it's possible to fully break free from a manipulative family? Or do the effects linger with us forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's keep this conversation going and support one another.